Today we are going to look at creating building styles in InfraWorks and texture mapping. I've created a file here that is Tutorial08 building style. I'm going to open this here, and this is the Cincinnati campus continuation of the tutorial from last time, where we built the roads and additional trees and all this. So now I would like to work on this building over here that is at the corner of Jocelyn and Digby. As you can see here, the texture that is on this building here is a generic texture that is created by InfraWorks. This is a quick and dirty way to view your buildings, and the building itself is coming from the OpenStreetMap data. And this is great to just quickly look at it. But let's say you're working in this area and you want this to be very realistic to what is actually at this site. So I've pulled up Google Maps here to sort of show what this building looks like. So this is the building that we are looking at over here, right here. This building is here. And I want to replicate this facade over here. There are a couple of ways I can do this. One is I can change the facade of this building, because when I click on the building, you can see that the library flyout will bring what the style of the facade that has been applied by InfraWorks to this, and also the rule with which it has been applied. So the rule meaning where the doors are, where the windows are, and so on and so forth. You can see here from this Google imagery that it is very different. It is not symmetrical like this. It's not a storefront or anything. It's just a representation. So first, let's look at the building styles that we can modify and how this is applied. And then we are going to map an actual texture onto this building. Before we do that, I'm going to hit enter a few times here to exit from the selection. When I hover my cursor over this, you can see that the entire building is getting selected. Now, I don't want that. What I want is the ability to apply different facades to different sites. For example, I want this side of the building to look different than that side, which is what it is in reality. So I want that to appear that way. So the reason it looks this way right now is by default, InfraWorks sets up the building resolutions to be very low. I'm going to change that so that I can change how I select the building. At low resolution, it selects the whole building, or I can select, I can see what the roof area is, and I can see the sides of the building that it sort of highlights based on where I hover. Now I want to change this. But before I do that, I want to have this view set up so that I can quickly jump to this. So I've created a bookmark here that brings me to this view. So even if I'm over here, you're already familiar with bookmarks. I've created one for this building. So I'm going to zoom into that. It's going to stay here. Now, to change the resolution, I'm going to go to Settings and Utilities. And I'm going to go to Application Options here. Here, I can change the resolution of the buildings to what I want to see in much higher resolution so that I can handle the facades of the different sides of the building separately. So I'm going to go to Model Generation, and you can see here that the building facade detail by default is low. I'm going to set this to medium or high. The computer that I'm using here is pretty good, so I'm going to choose high for the moment. You might want to keep it at medium so that the program doesn't crash, depending on how much memory and processor speed you have. So I'm going to select high here. I'm going to click OK. So I'm going to hover. Nothing has changed. That is because it is very similar to if you have used AutoCAD before. When you do a lot of changes in AutoCAD, you have to regenerate the model. And since this is an Autodesk product, the same regeneration function is available here for the visualization of this three-dimensional texture mapping to show up in high resolution. So in the same Settings tab under uh, under this main flyout, we have regenerate. So when I click that, this might take a little bit depending on the size of your model, but it'll regenerate and it'll change the view to a plan view to show you that the model has been regenerated. So I don't have to search for it because now I have a bookmark. I'm going to select that. Now you can see that if I get closer, there's a lot more detail to the model. And the other thing that has changed is that I can select individual faces, as you can see here, which means that when I map the texture, I can map the texture for this face and this face separately. Previously, in a low resolution mode, the entire facade was getting selected, all sides. Basically, all the vertical faces of the building get selected when you hover on it. So now I have this where I want it. And again, let's go back here and look at the building. It's brick, and this is brick, but it is white. I don't like it. So I want this to be as close as possible to actual site conditions. So I'm going to select the building here, and I'm going to change the style of the building to something that is close to what it is. So I'm going to click on the manual style, and by default it pulls up a few styles that are in use in this area of the map. I'm going to select more styles. So under more styles, you have the select style or color menu, in which there are many default styles that are used by InfraWorks to map the entire area with the texture mapping to demonstrate buildings. So here you also have different other options of materials. For a city block, this basically gives you the sidewalks, road texture, and all that. I'm going to go back to, there are other things here. You can figure this out, go over this and take a look at this. There are many different materials that get mapped. You can also map it with the color. There are also, these are the styles and colors for the trash cans and light poles and all those things. But we are interested in a facade, and I see that there are many different types here. There's also a drop-down menu here that gives you basically different facade options. So if I select a facade, just the facade, it gives me the classification of the different styles of the building that are available. So I have a barrier style, the popular one in Cincinnati, which is brick. There's also concrete and glass. There's marble and stone, metal and glass. So you would select this, for example, if you're doing the dorms by Jefferson and MLK, you would use metal and glass, or you can use a simple color that we saw. So I'm interested in brick. So I'm going to go here, and these are all the different types of bricks that are available, brick styles that are available. I'm going to select Polis because it looks red like the building that I have here, and I'm going to select Polis. I'm going to say OK. So you can see immediately the facade changes to the applied, the selected material style. And when you zoom in here, you can really see how detailed this is. This is very good. There's also some ornamentation and all that. That's great. This is good, but this is still not good enough. So we're going to do this. We are going to change this to the style we want. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to choose the build and manage. Under create and manage your model, I'm going to select the style palette. Now, when I select the style palette, it pulls up the style for all the different materials, objects, and infrastructure items and components that can be used in InfraWorks. What I'm interested in is the facade. So I'm going to select the facade on the panel here. And remember, we had all the styles. This is very similar to, if any of you have used Civil 3D, this is very similar to the prospector menu in Civil 3D. The styles are converted, or rather classified, into individual groups that can be further customized in a prospector style modification menu that you can individually select. So now I'm interested in the polis material that I selected. You can verify that by clicking that, and you can see that it is polis. And I'm going to escape out of this, and then I'm going to create an instance of this facade material to modify how my windows and doors and everything are going to be placed. So similar to 3ds Max or Maya, you don't want to modify the original material. You want to create an instance and work with the instance to make the customized modifications that you want. So in this case, I have created a new a clone or an instance of the original polis material. There are two ways to do this. You can click on that, and there is two ways of duplicating this material. One is to duplicate that into another catalog, or the other is to duplicate the selected style where it is. Now, what does this mean? If I want a new folder in which I'm going to collect all my new materials, I'm going to create a new catalog. So the catalog editing is over here on the top in the style palette, and the style editing is over here on the bottom, which means that this menu over here lets you organize your styles, the catalog editing menu. The style editing menu helps you to change the existing style through creation of instances and duplicates. I'm going to create a new folder here, a new catalog, and I'm going to rename this as custom catalog. So now when I select polis, I'm going to say duplicate style into another catalog, which means that I'm going to move this duplicated style into the custom catalog box that I just created. So to select polis, I'm going to click on duplicate into another catalog. So here I'm going to select the custom catalog that I just created over here, which now shows up in the copy item into the organized folder menu as to where I want it. Now, if you remember, under the facade tab, there are many different types of catalogs of marble and stone, concrete and glass. All that classification shows up here under facade because I'm under the facade tab. So I'm going to select the custom catalog over here and say OK. Let's look at this here. So when I double click this, you can see that polis has been copied over here. I don't want to keep the same name. It's under facade brick custom catalog that I created. I'm going to rename this as polis test. So here you can collect many different customized catalogs, styles that you create, and keep them in one place so that in future projects you can just copy this folder into your next project into a different computer, and you will get all these styles to come in there and you can readily use it without recreating all the styles. So creating a folder and being organized from the very beginning really helps in the long run of project management. So I'm going to go back here to facade brick. I've already created a polis test here that is an instance of polis that we have used here on the building. And I'm going to modify this. There are two ways to modify this. One is to double click this and then it opens, or you can select the style and click the edit icon on the bottom. It brings you to the same thing. There are a few items here that we want to get familiarized with as to how this works. So this is the configuration of the style configuration under the facade panel of the style palette under the brick catalog of a style named Polis, which I have created an instance of and called it Polis test. Now, if I had used the custom catalog, it would show as configure facade brick custom catalog and Polis test. I'm going to modify the one that I have right here. So this tells you where you are, and again, you can change the theme by selecting a different facade here if you want. We will not get into all that complexity, that is not required. So we are not going to use any of that. We will take a look at what all this means. Now, there is a layout tab on the left here and a block sequence tab on the right here. And there are a number of commands here to modify this. There's also a preview size of the style here. By default, Autodesk assumes that the building is 20 meters by 20 meters. It doesn't really matter whether it's meters or feet, because if it is 20 meters by 20 meters, it is still a square. If it is 20 feet by 20 feet, it is still a square. The materials are configured based on proportionality and not necessarily units. So it doesn't tell you here meters or feet. We'll just call it 20 units by 20 units. And the facade is shown here as to how it wraps around the building. Now there's only one layout, and there are 4 different items here, FL0, FL01, FL02, and FL03. What that means is it is floor level 0, 1, 2, and 3, as you can see here. That's what that means. So we have one layout that wraps around the building the same way on all 4 sides, or how many more sides it has, in this sequence of floors, of blocks. Block 1, Block 2, Block 3, and Block 4. You can also view this in a 3D geometry, which turns on the light so you can zoom in and look at your model. You can turn off the 3D, it will still show you the wrapped texture on it. There's also a roofing component, which you can select a gray color or a white color depending on what the roof is, and I'll show you how to do that. So this is the basic setup of any of these textures that you open that it will show up as. So the arrangement that you see here is the arrangement that it will show in the preview window, and in the Polis, this is the default setup. Now I want to change this to match something close to that. So I'm going to select that block sequence and select edit. Now this shows how we can change the block and floor arrangement of the style in the way it is applied over the size of the building. Let me go back here. So you had a layout. The layout determines how the texture is wrapped. The block sequence tells you how the blocks are arranged, and the arrangement is determined by the floor configuration here. We'll look at this in a moment. So when I click this, it opens the editing capabilities for the block sequence, which is done under the block and floor arrangement editor. Now, in this window, there are a number of other things that help you determine how you're going to arrange this texture. This is quite similar to the previous menu if you look at it. You have the preview window, and the preview window has a size of width and height and resetting preview and 3D geometry. and you have two different layouts that you can adjust. Very similar layout. In this case, instead of the wrapping around the building and the sequence, you have the available floors, the vertical pattern in which it is going to be arranged, and the available cells, we'll talk about that in a moment, and the pattern in which these cells are arranged horizontally. So what does that mean? The first window over here is the available floors listed on the left. And the current arrangement of these floors is shown in the vertical pattern list. And the vertical patterns of the floors, the way the arrangement of these cells that make up these windows, these arrangement of brick patterns and all these are in the floor arrangement cells that you can choose, which show how it is arranged. So let's take a look at this. So FL00, floor 0. So let's look at this floor. I'm going to zoom into this. Floor 0. Oh, that's too bright. So let's look at this. Floor 0. I'm over here. Floor level 0. End, L for left, left. And so by reason, it should end with the same code on the right. So it does. Floor 0, end to the right. So I have a left cell and a right cell. Between them are windows and separating walls. So let's see here, floor 0, we are still on floor 0. Window, W-I-N for window, window here. And there's a star between that. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then after the window, we have a door. There's a door. And again, after the door, there is a window that is here. And the end piece. So that makes sense. Let's look at floor 1. Same end piece on the right, but a different pattern. Arrangement is the same, and there are 3 windows. And you can see here that it says floor 1, floor level 1, which is here, window, which is here, star, floor level 1, which means that the star means that there has to be at least one window when you look at this floor. What does that mean? It means that when I change the width here, there has to be at least one window, and as I change the width, it is going to proportionally add windows on that level. Now let's see if that it does that. So the current width by default is 20 units. So I'm going to increase that. You see that? So as I increase or decrease, it adds or removes windows. So you can see here that once I get to a size that windows cannot be installed, I only have the left and right piece. And when I go 0, it becomes a line. And end pieces, at least one window. Now 2. Now that I have 2 windows, I get a door because I have the arrangement pattern, floor arrangement on floor 0 to say the same thing. There has to be at least one window and one door. So because the window has been stated first, it will be at least one window. And then when I increase the width, there's at least one window and a door. And then I increase, so that code repeats on floor 0. At least one window and a door. And now there is more width available, so it will put, again, by precedence of the code, at least one window. So one window appeared. And when I increase, it puts another window. And at the end of the door, there is a comma, which means that after the door, there is not a repeating item of the at least function. There is definitely a window after this if the width allows. So it puts a window there. Now let me increase more. You can see that at least one window and one door. And then after the door, there are just windows. After the door, there are just windows and an end piece. So the windows will keep adding, followed by an end piece to close the building, depending on what the rule is. So this is the rule with which the program is set up to add or remove texturized patterns that mimic a building facade onto the OpenStreetMap building data that is on your InfraWorks file. And I'm going to say close here. Oh, the same way, when you do the height, similarly, as you increase the height, it increases the number of windows on each floor. You can see that the same code is applied here. Every time I increase the floors, there's at least floor 0 and floor 1. And there's a floor 2, and when I increase the height, it'll add a floor 3, which you tell the program through the use of the asterisk symbol over here. And this is how it is set up. Now, if I add another floor, the way to add the floor is, now there are only 4 floors, and I'm making a pattern using the same configuration through horizontal and vertical pattern setup. Now I can individually add floors. I can add a floor by clicking on add here. So add new floor. I can stay with the same nomenclature. I will say FL05. Now why would I do this? Now the moment I do that, you can see that the vertical pattern does not care, but the horizontal pattern says that the pattern is empty. Now that is because I don't have a horizontal sequence of patterns set up. How do I do that? You can see here that there are available cells, and there's a camera next to it. And these correspond to the codes that you have seen here. So end L is end. And right now it stops here at floor 3. Now I'm going to add a comma and a floor 05. It says it is invalid because there are 4 floors and I have not included floor 4. And without the floor 4, I cannot put floor 5. So it gives me an error. So I'm going to say floor 4 and floor 5. Now it is still an error because the pattern is determined by the star of repetitions here. So I'm going to delete that and I'm going to put a comma. And it is still showing an invalid string symbol 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is because I have it as floor, not FL. Floor 5, floor 5. So it has to match the codes. And let's see what happens here. I could still do that. You can see here it multiplied to that. Now I'm going to go here and choose what happens in floor 5. As you can see here, floor 5, I've not chosen any cells, so it is repeating the end pieces to close this box on floor 5. So I'm going to look at this. I'm going to select what I want. So maybe I'm going to put an end piece anyway, because I have to match this end. So I'm going to go here, and an easier way to do that is to look at floor 4, and there is a floor end L, floor 3 end L. So I'm going to go to floor 5, and I'm going to select floor end L. So you can see here it is starting to change what I put in here. I'm going to put an end. I'm also going to put a window. I'm going to put another window, and a floor end piece. So now I've created a different level configuration on top. And I want to do the same thing with floor 4. I'm going to remove this code. I'm going to say end. I'm going to put another window, and another window, and an end piece. So that gives me a completely different facade on top. Now, if I made a mistake and I want to add another window here, I can do that by just bringing my cursor to the place I want the window. I click it and I get 4 windows. I can do the same thing to this floor, floor 5. Then I'm going to put another window over there. So it gives me that pattern, and I'm going to say close. I'm going to say OK. And now when I select this, I'm going to go ahead and select more styles and polish test. It doesn't change this here because the building size does not apply to the configuration that we have done. So it is not going to apply that. And I can choose a different configuration style by selecting just polish, and it keeps the polish style that can apply to this. As you can see, this is actually really difficult to configure to get it right. So I'm going to choose a different way of doing this. Now, I'm going to use Google Maps to see if I can use the existing picture to map this building with exactly what it is at this intersection. So I'm going to open Google Maps. I'm going to zoom in till I get to my street view. So now I have a building selection box, which when I select it, it shows me the building, and I like the way it looks. And this is the image that I want to map onto my building. So I'm going to keep it like that and see if I cannot Photoshop this. So I'm going to go ahead and select the window snipping tool. I'm going to create a new snip. I'm going to use the mode rectangular so I can control what I'm snipping. And then new, and I'm going to select this whole image over here. I'm going to save this file. I've already saved this facade as facade over here. I'm going to override it. I'm going to replace it, say yes. I'm going to save that facade in my folder. Now, I've gotten what I need from here for this face of the building. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to open this image that I just saved. I want to straighten this out onto the building and map this. I want to straighten out this building. Sorry, I was on a different monitor. I want to straighten this building out so that it is a perfect rectangle, so that I can map it on the InfraWorks file. So let's see how we do that. I'm going to open this in Photoshop. I was doing this before, so I'm going to close that, save that. I was playing around with this earlier today, and I'm going to show you step by step how I did that. So I'm going to open this file, open with Photoshop. So now I have this facade, and I'm going to go over to my layers menu, and I'm going to unlock this layer. And I'm going to jump back here to InfraWorks to figure out what my building size is. This is when it becomes very important to know the proportions. So I'm going to just select the building. There are a couple of ways to quickly figure out what the building size is. The height of the building you can figure out by clicking on this up arrow over here. It tells me that it is 8 meters tall. To know the size of the building, I can use the measure tool, or the easiest way to do it is to click on one of these gizmo boxes over here. And the moment I click that, it tells me the size of the building. So it is 27.053 meters wide by 8 meters tall. That is the information I want. So I'm going to go to Photoshop over here, and I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to change this to inches, and I'm going to put in the size that I saw in InfraWorks. Which is 27.053 by 8 meters. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop here, and 27.053 by 8. Again, similar to the style catalog menu, the inches here doesn't matter. Only the proportions matter. So 27.053, oops, 27.053 by 8. The proportions are correct. So I'm going to create a file that is the exact size of the building face, of this face. And I want to wrap this texture onto that face. So now I have that file. I'm going to use the select tool of the rectangular marquee, and I'm going to copy that. Control C to copy to the clipboard. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste it into this. Now, as you can see, it is skewed. I'm going to hit Control T for transform. I'm going to hold down my Control button. I'm going to transform this with the grips on the end. So I'm going to do that. Let me close the layer here. I'm going to bring this over here. And I know where the bottom of this garage is, which is the bottom of the building. So I'm going to approximately follow that to adjust the skew by holding down Control. I'm going to bring that to the bottom of the door and the bottom of these garage doors over here to make it, to stretch it at 90 degrees, which I want to see. So I'm holding my door bottom here as reference. I'm going to hold the Control key and also unskew that side, unskew the other side. Adjust this a little more, a little bit of trial and error. Then remove the skew some more. I'm going to do that. That looks good on that side. That looks good on the other side. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to keep it like that. I'm going to hit Enter. So now I have the building facade. I think I want to adjust this a little more because I can see the light of the sky on this side. So I'm going to select V, Control T, and I'm going to adjust this a little more. There. Now I can see that the doors are fine. The bottom of the garage seems to be fine. I like that it is all straight. I might adjust this a little more. That looks good. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to save as. I'm going to save this as a JPEG file. I've already saved this test texture. Let's call this test texture 2. There. High resolution. That looks good. I'm going to come over here. Now I want to map the texture back onto this building here. So I'm going to hit enter, exit a few times to get out of the building menu. And I'm going to go here onto the style palette and find where my materials are. I've already imported the previous one here. I'm going to import the image that I just saved. And I'm going to select the style editing button here to add a new style. And that brings me to the define new material. By default, InfraWorks selects color. I'm going to select texture. So because we saved a texture that we're going to map. And so I select texture and I'm going to select where this is. I'm going to find out where it is. I'm going to copy the path and then find it over here, texture 2. So I've added that, and texture 2 has been added, and it shows us where it is. And this is the default location where the textures for this particular InfraWorks file is stored, so that when you package it, just like InDesign, it'll package all these textures for you. Or when you sync this to the cloud, it'll look for the test texture 2 that we have mapped here and put it in your BIM model online, in which you can download, and the textures will come in as swatches, just like InDesign packaging. When you open the file, the links are saved and it remaps the links to the file. I'm going to click OK. And over here, now I still know what the size of my texture should be. It was 20, what was it? File, image, canvas size, 25.056 by 8. I'm going to change this to 25.056 by 8 to be consistent with the image and the texture setting that it has to apply. I'm going to say OK, and you can see here the new material 2 has appeared here. Now remember, at the beginning of this tutorial, we changed the application option of model generation to be high. So this allows us to apply individual textures to each face of the building. Now I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to select this new material, and I'm going to just drag and drop there. Now I have the building looking exactly the way the building is, which we saw on Google Maps. There we go. I'm not too worried about the cars here, but you can see that the texture has been perfectly mapped onto the building for this side. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. You can see from here, if I do a simulated run of a model, of a car or a drive model, all I want to see is this facade over here, because if I'm standing here, that is what I would see. To hide the cars, you can probably place other cars over here. So maybe I will take the city furniture and I will place some city furniture over here. You know, I'll probably pick up a car somewhere and place it over here to sort of hide where my car is. So I'm going to turn this around facing the garage. You can see that it is mapping the correct size because the size of the car makes sense. So I can duplicate this car. Instead of copying, I can duplicate this car by selecting the car. I hit Control D and it duplicates the car, and I can place this car over here. So now when I'm driving down the street, let's say I select a different car. I want to select a Ford Explorer. I want to put the Ford Explorer over here. Turn this car facing that garage. I'm going to move that using the gumball tool similar to Rhino. I'm going to place that car there. This may not fit. It probably is a little too big. Maybe some scale issues here. So I'm going to slightly reduce the size of the truck. Then probably reduce the size of this car a little bit. So now when I am going through the street, you don't see the image mapping of the cars here when I go through the street, and it's as realistic as possible. And the building is mapped, so it looks very realistic to the street. Maybe I'll add some people here. Maybe there's an ambulance going over here, So I'm going to add an ambulance that's going that way. And notice that if I move the ambulance down, it'll still sort of when I move the ambulance along the road, it adjusts itself, and you don't want to adjust the height of it so that it doesn't end up below the street. So as I move the ambulance, it sort of adjusts its height to show it visually correctly. So I'm going to put the ambulance over there, like it's going somewhere over there. And let's see here. I'm going to place the ambulance on the lane. That looks good. And maybe I'll put a few people on the street. Maybe I'll select a few people. Doesn't appear to be the correct scale, but you can sort of adjust. You can see that it's 1.395 meters. I want a person to be 6 foot tall. So 6 divided by 3.281 is 1.828. So that seems fine. A little shorter than 6 feet. So we can check the height against the car. So maybe this person is trying to get into his car. I'm going to place that person over there. And you can create a streetscape that is quite realistic. And you can see here now that is what the building looks like. So I'm going to close my style palette here, and I'm going to save this view as completed streetscape. I'm going to add that, and that gives you the view that you need as realistic as possible for the new road that we created with the trees and all that. This ends the tutorial. I would recommend this method because this is much easier and you can control it with the realistic imagery. You can also go to the street and take pictures of your project area and map the image onto your building to make it look as realistic as possible. And this concludes this tutorial. There's a little bit of the issue with the window here. That is probably because of the sizing. I didn't crop it correctly, but you get the picture. You get how to do it. So I'm going to stop the tutorial over here, and this will be posted soon to the Ming 3D website.